guys, no war game today, but we're going to be playing a board game. I'm playing Linny 1815 from the last Eagles collection, or Eagles of France collection, by Hexacism. Board game series I like. You've heard me talk about it and perhaps seen some of the games before. We're playing a small scenario here. This is the Assault on Saint-Amand and Saint-Amand-La Haye. And some other villages on the Prussian southern part of their front line. Linny is up here off table, and we're going to see the French and Van Damme assaulting these positions. Let's have a look at the forces we've got. We've got Van Damme's corps, so he's got the 3rd Light Cavalry Division, and then he's got the 7th, 10th and 11th and 8th Infantry Divisions, who are formed up on the southern edge of the game map. And then the Prussians have variable reinforcements, reflecting the fact that part of the objectives for Van Damme was to suck in the Prussian reserves to allow Napoleon to be successful with his attack of the Guard against the weakened Prussian centre. So we start with this front set of Prussian infantry in place, and then they have the option on each successive turn of bringing on some or all of these reserves. The more reserves they bring on, the more successful the French have been, and the more likely the French are to achieve victory. Let's see how this game goes out. I hope you enjoy watching this and gives you a flavour of how this game plays. Cheers. Okay, so here we are, we've completed the pre-game deployment. The Prussians get to deploy the 1st Infantry Brigade with 1 or 2 units from the 3rd Infantry Brigade. We have chosen to put most of them in Saint-Amand. It's the most immediately threatened village. We have a French division approaching it from the southeast and 2 French divisions approaching it from the southwest. We then put 2 battalions into Saint-Amand-La Haye. Again, this is vulnerable. It's on the French side of the river, and probably the second focus of the French attack. And then we've just put some screening forces in Wagenley. So we've got a unit of Jaegers and a unit of Hussars and some horse artillery holding some of those river crossings on the far left of the Russian position. For the French, we've really just deployed as far forward as we can. Our artillery is all deployed out. For this game, you have to have a lead unit for each attack. So we'll work that out, but given we've got larger hexes on this map, as it's a small scenario, we've got double-size hexes, I've not stacked any of the units, so you can see all of the units that are in play. I'll work out a way of deciding which is the lead unit. But many of the units have the same morale, and really lead unit choices are critical when you've got different morale levels, so won't have too much impact on the game immediately anyway. All right, let's get cracking. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The French automatically have initiative and get to activate first. All right, so we completed the first impulse of the 3 p.m. Game turn. And what's happened is the French moved the 8th Division up to the river line across the village gardens away from the right-hand edge of Saint-Amand village. They then moved the 7th Division up to the high ground overlooking the church in the middle of the village and the left flank of the village, and moved the 10th Division on a flanking manoeuvre to potentially either assault Saint-Amand-La Haye or Saint-Amand itself, while at the same time the 11th Division has moved up to threaten Saint-Amand, and the cavalry screen has moved forward on the left. Had to take command rolls because they were out of command range, and all but the horse artillery passed it, but they're restricted to half movement when they're out of command range. So they only moved forward 4 hexes, and the horse artillery only 1. So that's where the French got to. For the Prussians, no units moved, but they did open fire with their artillery in Saint-Amand. They fired at the 8th Division and drove the 23rd line and the artillery that was moving up in its support back from the river line with their defensive fire, but their shots against the 11th Leger here on this high ground were ineffective. So that's where we are after the first impulse. Prussians don't feel the need to call on any reserves at this point, so we'll move on with the second impulse for the French. Play through this turn on camera, as there may be some more activity. So you start the turn with offensive fire. So you do this before movement. So the French are moving first. So the French artillery batteries on this high ground and on the lower ground next to them are going to combine their weight of fire against these buildings at the left-hand end of Saint-Amand. If you're firing 4 strength points or less, there's a -1 modifier. If you're firing more than 10, there's a +1 modifier. So unfortunately, both batteries will combine, but the second battery will give no incremental benefit. We might have to think about the reserve artillery battery here, and whether it's better deployed at the end of this phase back on top of the hill to add some artillery support. All right, let's do a roll for these two batteries opening fire. And we roll a 4. The lower you roll, the better. So with artillery firing into buildings, you get a +1 modifier. So we cause 1 step loss on the Prussians we've shot at, and they have to do a quality check. Morale levels are 7. You take the morale check on the morale before the casualties. So you can see here, the grey number in the middle drops to a 6. So the Prussian morale has been hit by the number of casualties they've taken, but we still have to roll a 7 because it's the morale at the beginning of the turn. So we roll a 4, and so on that basis we've passed our morale because the die roll is lower than our morale level, and we can stay in place, but we have taken a step loss. Otherwise, for the French, there is their artillery battery here. I don't think we're gonna. Shall we fire with that one? We might as well have a go across the river, because I think we'll probably just move. There will be a movement penalty when artillery batteries fire. That takes up a significant level of activity in the square that turn. So if you're going to move out of that square, you take a -3 modifier. That'll restrict the 23rd line from only moving 1 square forward, but I think we might live with that. Let's fire this battery, also going into the right-hand end of this village. Again, there'll be a +1 modifier because we're firing into a built-up area, and actually because we're at a 3 hex range, there'll be another one, so this will be a +2 modifier. Again, the lower the better. We roll an 8, that becomes a 10. That's no effect. That's it for French offensive fire. We'll now do French. Okay, so I have played this scenario before and attacked with the French from turn 1, and we've just suffered bloody losses, so we're being a little bit more cautious this time, perhaps a little bit more thoughtful. So we've moved Van Damme across a little bit. This will now mean in next turn all units will be in command, but for this turn, unfortunately, the light cavalry was still out of command, and 3 of the units failed their leadership tests, so we're only able to move 1 hex. They've moved slightly towards their commander, get them back in command range, and we'll be able to launch them next turn. Otherwise, the 10th Division has started manoeuvring itself for a potential assault against Saint-Amand-la-Haye. We've brought an artillery battery up into Le Hanau village, where it'll be able to start bombarding Saint-Amand-la-Haye. And then we've moved the infantry battalions, the 86th, 33rd, 12th and 2nd Swiss, up towards the edge of that village. None of the Prussian defenders have artillery, so as long as we stay more than 1 hex away, we're out of musket range and can form up effectively. On the left, on the right here in Saint-Amand itself, the 10th Infantry Division has continued to execute its flanking manoeuvre and has driven into the edge of Saint-Amand, into the unoccupied part of the village. Luckily, the 1st Westphalian Landwehr are holding the river crossings, so they were unable to prevent, or they were able to prevent the French from cutting off the Prussians in the centre of the village, but may well be the case for reinforcements needing to make sure that we can keep communications open with Saint-Amand. Otherwise, we've moved the 11th Division forward into assault positions, but we've moved an artillery battery up and the reserve artillery battery up, so we're going to do some more artillery battery bombardment first. And then on the far right, the 8th Division has also moved forward. It's occupied the right-hand edge of Saint-Amand village and moved up other infantry battalions in support. So we're refusing the southern facing of the village and trying to hit it on both flanks. Let's see how successful we can be. We're not going to do any close assaults this turn. Assaults will go in next turn for the French as we move into the 4 p.m. turn, but there will be some defensive fire now from. Okay, so the first thing the Prussians are going to do is open fire with the artillery battery at the right-hand end of Saint-Amand. It's going to fire at the 64th line and 37th line. We'll deem the weaker unit is in the front, the 9-point unit, as there was no morale benefit of exposing the stronger one. So he's going to actually target the 64th line. Let's see how we do. We roll an 8. That becomes a 7 because we're firing at close range. So the French have to take a morale test. Their morale is 7. They roll an 8. They fail their morale and they have to retreat 1 hex. They are forced back across the river. Right, the 6th Westphalian Landwehr are going to open fire with musketry. They're also going to try and drive this attack off on the right. Again, a low dice roll needed. They will suffer a +1 penalty to this roll as the French are in the village. That becomes a 9. The musketry of the Landwehr does not drive off the light brigade, 15th Léger. All right, now let's move across to the centre of the village. The 12th Infantry infantry battalions have got no targets. Everything's more than 1 hex away. But the 29th Infantry and the attached 7th Artillery Battery will open fire. They're going against the Léger. They're the strongest French units in proximity. This is a close target. So they've only got 3 strength points of artillery, so that'll be a +1. But they're firing at close range. That becomes a -1. So they net out. It'll be a straightforward roll. We're on 11. That's no effect for that artillery, so they will not be impacted. I was actually wrong. The 12th Infantry can fire. They can fire at 34th line. Again, this will be a +1 because they're firing into buildings. We've rolled an 8. That becomes a 9. Again, so defensive Prussian fire here has no effect. The other Prussian artillery over here is behind that ridge line. The lighter colours are higher ground from the French in Le Hainaut. It is on the edge of artillery range, but the targets can't be seen. So the final piece, which I should have done actually earlier, I should have fired this French artillery battery, and they're going to go and fire across the river at the 24th Infantry. This will be a +1 modifier because of the buildings. That's quite a good roll. That's a 3. That becomes a 4. That will have an effect. So an artillery result of 4 is 1 step loss and a morale test. Again, the 24th Infantry morale drops to 6, but they were on 7 at the start of the turn. Reroll a 9. That is 2 more than the infantry's morale, which was 7. 3 more and it's a rout, but with a failure by 1, it's a retreat. So the 24th line pull back. All right, so it's 4 o'clock now, and French get to activate first. All units are now in command as Van Damme's moved across to the central part of the battlefield, so he can exert command control over his light cavalry division as well. Still pondering how best to use those. The Prussians again have the opportunity to bring on reserves, which I think they will choose to do. French get to activate first. Let's see if they do any offensive. Right, next assault will be in Saint-Amand. Let's start with this assault on the left. The artillery play no part, so let's take the 3 assault counters off. So the French have got 10, 22, and you can only attack with 20 points, 32, 42. So 42 points of assaulting units against the Prussians who have 7. So that's a more than 5 to 1 modifier. So that is a -5 to the melee result. It becomes -4 because we're in a built-up area. It goes back up to -5, and it can't be higher than -5 because of the higher French morale. We're all a 9, -5 modifier. Takes on a melee result. The 9 goes down to a 4. All units in the stack take a step loss, so the infantry are destroyed. The artillery take a step loss. They're the last unit in the hex, and all of their accompanying infantry has been destroyed. So I believe we will also lose that artillery. I will just see the fire markers on the relevant hexes. That means it costs an extra 3 movement points to leave those hexes. All right, now let's see if we do any movement and if there are any assaults. I'm sure there will be. Right, so a rash of melee counters here as the French do coordinate assault all across the line. So assaulting the Prussian garrison in the Saint-Amand-la-Haye church. 3 battalions committed to that. The 5th line, actually I think will also have a go at attacking the 24th Infantry. So attacks all along the front in Saint-Amand-la-Haye, and again every stack that can is attacking in Saint-Amand. Assaulting is difficult. All these units will get defensive fire. Some of these units will be thrown back, but probably our best effort is to attack as far as we can. And units can do supporting fire, so you do want to attack all enemy units to draw off that supporting fire as well. All right, let's do some defensive fire for the Prussians first. So we'll start with the 24th Infantry. They are firing. It'll be a +1 effect, a 10. That has no effect on the assault. It goes in. Then we'll fire the 24th Infantry. It's going to go against the 12th line and the Swiss. The Swiss are leading because they've got a higher morale, which improves the chance of the assault. So they're going to break that one. We've rolled an 8. That will have no effect. So all of those assaults go in. All right, now let's do Saint-Amand-la-Haye. The artillery battery will be most effective. It's going to go against this lot of light troops and the artillery battery because, again, they've got higher morale and the assault will be most effective. So they've got a strength of 3. That's +1 modifier, but they're firing at close range, so that cancels out. So what do they get? Oh, it's tense. It's spinning. What's it going to be? Glass tabletop. Well, this is just taking forever. There we go, it's settling now. What's it going to be? It's a 6. All right, so 6, no net modifier. That's a morale test on the 8th. They roll a 6, their assault goes in. All right, let's do the 12th Infantry. They're going to fire against the stack to the north. That's got 20 points of assaulting in it, so that's the strongest stack. So we'll go for that one. Again, they're firing into a village, so there'll be a +1 modifier to this die roll, an 8. That has no effect. The assault goes in. All right, then the 25th First Westphalian Landwehr, the 25 strength point unit, is going to fire into the 15th Legere. Again, +1 modifier, no effect. And then finally, the artillery here will fire against this square. 6 strength points, so there is a -1 modifier because of the strength. And what do they get? They roll a 7, that becomes a 6. That's a morale test, and on a 7, they are not driven off. My gosh, that was pretty good for the French. Prussian defensive fire was ineffective. I think I've done all the shots. Yep, so that's all defensive fire complete. Assaults will now go in. I'll show you how the assault. We'll start with this fairly straightforward assault here. 56th line is attacking the 24th Infantry, or elements of the 24th Infantry. It's a 2-to-1 combat ratio, so that is a -2 modifier to the die roll, and the French morale is higher, 7 to 6. That's a -3 to the modifier, but the Prussians are defending a built-up area, so it falls back to a -2 modifier. We roll a 6, that drops to a 4. That will be a successful result. A 4 is all defending units in the stack take a step loss. So that Prussian infantry unit is destroyed, and the French can advance, which they will, into that square. All right, we'll do the second assault down here then. So defensive fire has been completed. They are in a strong point inside that church, so that will give them a +2 modifier. So what's our attacking strength? It's 16, 20, 26, 36 against 12, so that's a 3-to-1 modifier. That's -3. Our morale, because of the Swiss, is 1 higher. That is -4, but the buildings reduce it to -2. This is the objective square in Saint-Amand-la-Haye. This is a key roll. It's really good. It's a 9. It's good for the Prussians. It goes down by 2, so it becomes a 7, which means both sides take a morale test. All right, let's do the Swiss first. They passed the morale test. Let's do the 33rd line. They fail the morale test, fall back 1 square. The 86th line, fail their morale test, they fall back 1 square, and then the 24th Infantry themselves, wow, they rout. That's a terrible morale test. They failed it by more than 3. If you've got a retreat, you can deflect 1 retreat result by taking a step loss, but you cannot affect a rout result. They have to retreat 3 squares towards their baseline, which is this top right-hand corner. So 1, 2, 3. They are now routing. We'll put a rout counter on them, but because the French did not win that combat, they can't automatically occupy that objective. But Saint-Amand-la-Haye, for the moment at least, is clear of Prussia. It looks like that artillery unit can remain in the square at least this turn, because it only had to take 1 step loss. All right, let's do the next melee attack, which will be the 70th line, the 34th, the 4th and the 82nd against the 12th Infantry. So we have 18, and again 24 is reduced to 20, so that is 18, 28, 38, so that's a 3-to-1 modifier going against the Prussians. The Prussians are in the church in the middle of the village, so that gives them a -2 modifier, so that makes it all square. And the morale in this case is the same. Right, that's a 5 result with no modifier. So the defender has to take a morale test at +1. Right, the defender rolls a 9, that becomes a 10, the morale is 7, so they rout. They can rout through a friendly hex. 1, 2, 3. So they rout through von Ziethen Square. He then has to take a morale mod check, which they have passed. So the morale is not contagious. Well, the morale failure is not contagious. But the French do have the opportunity to advance after combat. So we'll advance our strongest unit into the church, and we have captured Saint-Amand. Right, we'll now do the 15th Légers assault. Perhaps somewhat foolhardy, as they're going against a much stronger enemy. So they're attacking with 17 points of strength. Half of 17 is another 8, so that takes it on to 25. So that's 1 to, that will be 1 to 1.5. So that's a -1 modifier for their strength points. They're assaulting a built-up area, so that becomes -2, but their morale is 2 higher, so it's all square. And we roll a 7. Both sides have to take a morale check. Let's check the Landwehr. They roll a 7. That's a morale failure. Now, we've got a difficult question. We can take a step loss and stay in the square, or we can retreat. We will have a little think about that. If we retreat, the French can advance onto combat. They will then surround that remaining Prussian unit, which will have no retreat path, which is why the 15th Légers attacked first. So I think we want to try and keep a toehold in the village as well. We are going to take a step loss, and von Ziethen and the 1st Westphalian Landwehr will hang on to their positions. Right, and then the final assault of the turn, which has gone really very well for the French. We have 21 points, which reduced to 20, plus another 12 points, so that's 32 points, assaulting against a strength of Prussian defenders of 12. So that is a 2-to-1 assault, becomes a -2 modifier, that becomes a -1 modifier, because the Prussians are in a built-up area. -1 modifier becomes a 10, that's a bad result for the French. The French have, on a 10, to take a step stack loss. The defenders choose, they will choose these stacks. This is the strongest French unit. The defenders get to make the choice, so they have caused heavy casualties on the 37th and the 64th. And at least in the eastern edge of the village, the Prussians are hanging on. Right, let's see how the Prussians respond as they do their first move at the 4 p.m. game time. Right, so the Prussians are in pretty desperate states. They've brought the 2nd Infantry Brigade on as reserve. They've dispatched the brigades Kermack, Landwehr Cavalry and Jaegers to occupy the chateau, just to try and take possession of that before the French can storm in. We'll see whether cavalry do any good against infantry fighting in built-up areas. I think they'll be ejected rapidly, but anyway, we're at least denying that objective without an assault. And similarly, we've brought our Westphalian Landwehr down into Saint-Amand-la-Haye to again try and contest the area around the churchyard, but again expected to be pushed rapidly out by the Swiss. The infantry move forward. It may be that our only choice is to try and defend Saint-Amand-la-Haye. Saint-Amand itself looks in a terrible situation. Right, that's our movement completed. We also did a shuffle within the village. Because line of sights don't extend through built-up areas, we were able to pull our artillery back to just south of the bridge, but we couldn't put all of the infantry in the same square as we'd be overstacking them. So let's see what plays out as we undertake the first Prussian move of this turn, and we'll do some offensive fire with these two infantry battalions. The 1st Westphalian Landwehr will fire at the light infantry, they have no effect, and the 12th will fire again at the 37th and 64th, trying to do some damage against them. They have no effect. Then the 7th Artillery will fire against the 88th line and the 22nd line. This will be a +2 modifier because they're firing into a built-up area. But we've rolled a double 1 remarkably. That becomes a 4, which will be 1 step loss and a test at +1. Okay, so the French fail their leadership test and they have to take a step loss, which we'll do on the most powerful unit, and they are exited from that square. Some decent defensive fire from the artillery. Right, we'll have a look at the rules. I'm not sure I fancy assaulting with our cavalry against that French infantry in the open, but it's got to be better than being assaulted ourselves in the village. So we are going to do an assault against the Swiss and the 12th line. They will do defensive fire, which has no effect. Right, we move on to hand-to-hand combat, and let's see, things will go well if the Prussians win, but there's a +2 modifier to this result because of the sheer scale of the Swiss they're assaulting. In fact, it may be worse because of the morale. Yep, actually it's a +4. Okay, so that's a terrible result. Prussian cavalry are driven off, and they have to take a morale test at +2, which they fail. They are also routing, driven off by the defence of the Swiss and the French. Okay, so the 11th Division that's pushed on into Saint-Amand-la-Haye has now pushed up to the river crossing in the village itself, and then advanced to also put pressure on the chateau. The 12th line has occupied the village on the north side of the river to give themselves some protection against a counter-attack from the Tsars. The 56th line is going to try and cheekily drive, which I'm sure they have got a good chance of, the Comarch Landwehr out of the chateau and capture the chateau for the French. Meanwhile, the 10th, which was attacking the left flank of Saint-Amand itself, has swung north to occupy the chateau, provide some reinforcements and help hold Saint-Amand-la-Haye, and the artillery is moving up in support, while the 7th and 8th continue to put pressure on the remnants of the Prussian position in the village. Alright, there is no effect from any offensive fire from the French, and we'll move on to it. Right, so the defensive fire from the artillery with the Westphalian Landwehr did cause some significant casualties on the 12th Leger, but not enough impact on the morale to call the assault off. So we've got 3 stacks assaulting the northern part of the village and 3 stacks assaulting the southern part of the village. Let's start with the south and see how this is going to play out. So we have 11, 23, 33 points attacking the Prussians. That's a 2-to-1 majority. That'll be a -2 modifier. Morale is 1 higher, so that's a -3 modifier, but the Prussians are in a built-up area, so that'll be -2. Okay, another good result for the Prussians. We were on 11, which becomes a 9, which is not a good result for the attacker. So they all take a morale test at +1, so they may stay in. All right, let's start with the morale of 6. units on the right, they actually pass their morale. 23rd line, it also passes its morale, and the 11th passes its morale. So none of the French are driven off, but we don't capture the southern part of the village. All right, let's assault the northern part of the village. So we have 17 plus 18 is 36, 35, 45, 44 points against 13 defending. So that's a 3-to-1 modifier, so that's -3. Morale is 3 higher, so that would be -6, becomes -5 because of the village. And we rolled an 6, so that becomes a 1. I think if the result goes below 0, everything is eliminated, but it's not. The result is a 1, so that is a step loss and a quality check at +2. So the first Westphalian Landwehr are destroyed. The artillery battery has to take a step loss, and then it's got to do a morale test at +2, which it fails. It routs. You take an extra step loss if you're cavalry, if you're routing, and then we've probably got to do a morale or a rout impact on von Ziethen. Let me just check. Not good for the Prussians. So von Ziethen was wounded and fled to the closest Allied unit, which was the one in the middle of the village. And so, unfortunately, he and that unit are now completely surrounded by French troops. And Saint-Armand-la Haye is also in French hands. And we'll do the final assault, which is the 56th line against the Kalmuk cavalry. So I'm not sure on this one, not sure whether the cavalry can even defend, but I'm going to play that they can. The Prussians need all the help they can get. This will be a +2 modifier for the French, as they're 2-to-1 in strength, and another -1 modifier because of their morale level. So net -3 modifier. Cavalry won't get any benefit for defending in buildings. We roll a 7, 6, 5, 4. So on a 4, the cavalry take a step loss, but don't actually get driven out of the chateau. So the Prussians may have a chance to get back in that building as we go into the second part of the 4 p.m. game turn. We're going to have to pull on more reinforcements for the Prussians. So all we've done, we passed our leadership test because I concluded that I don't think von Ziethen's leadership range can be 8, given he's now surrounded by enemy zones of control, so he has no leadership, so everything's out of command. But the Prussians did pass all 3 checks for these 3 infantry regiments, so they've moved to block the river crossings and at least give themselves the opportunity of their reserves coming on to the table. And the Jaegers have swapped with the Kalmuk Landwehr, who they didn't think would survive another attack next turn. So at least we have some infantry occupying the chateau, and our other cavalry unit has also passed its leadership tests. It's brought its artillery battery into sight of the French and may choose to attack next turn. All right, that's the end of turn 2, and the the French get 2 victory points for the 2 buildings they now occupy. Right, so all the offensive fire hasn't achieved very much for the French, but they are doing 2 assaults. So we're assaulting the chateau first. We have over 20 strength points, so that's a 10-to-1 advantage. That's a -5, and there will be some defensive fire, which doesn't do anything. We got a 9. So that is a -5 modifier, becomes a -3 modifier because of the built-up area. And we roll an 8. There we go, 7, 6, 5. On the morale table is a morale test at +1. And we roll an 8, that becomes a 9. We'd have to take a step loss, which would destroy us. So we won't, we will retreat from the chateau. And unfortunately for us, this allows the French to occupy the chateau, their 3rd objective on the table. And then we'll do our final assault probably in Saint-Armand. So how many points? All of these stacks are assaulting. There will be defensive fire. We have 1 unit doing defensive fire. It will fire against one of the 15th Leger because it wants to try and open a way up for reinforcements, but fails to cause any casualties. We rolled an 8. So we've now got the assault against the village. So we have 17, 18, 19, 20, 31, 36, 46, 48, 58, 59 points. 59 points against 12. So that's a -4 modifier, -3 because we're in a village, but +1 leadership because we're using the light infantry. So that was a -3 modifier, -2 because of the village, but then back to -3 for the higher morale. We've rolled a 9, that falls to a 6, which will simply be a morale test for the Prussians in the village. And they roll a 4, and they hang on. All right, that's the end of the French first part of the 5 p.m. game turn. The Prussians can elect for more reinforcements. They're going to have to go. So we've brought 3 waves of reinforcements on. That's conceded 16 victory points to the French, so that's not great. But we've had to do it. So we brought the 5th Infantry Brigade on to assault Saint-Amand-La Haye. We've got some light cavalry reserves, and we're throwing the 2nd Infantry Brigade against Saint-Amand. Let's see what they can do. The Infantry Brigade down here has had one of the brigades driven off by defensive fire from the French, so I don't think we're going to assault down there, but we will assault up here. So we've got we've got 26, 36, 46, 50 points against 9, so we've got a chance. So let's see, the defensive fire from the French are 4. That's pretty good for infantry. That causes 1 step loss on the Prussians. They'll choose this stack because that's the strongest stack. Okay, and they've got to take a morale test, which they pass. All right, so not quite as strong. So that's 24, 34, 44 points against 9. So that's 4 to 1 becomes 3 to 1. So that's a -3 modifier. Morale is the same. We roll a 5. -3 modifier takes that down to a 2. That's a great result on the melee. That's a morale test at +2, and the French 89th line take a step loss. So they fail. They only fail by 2, so they don't have to rout. But they take a step loss, and they're driven back 1 square. Won't be quite that good, because of course we're assaulting across the stream and into a village. So that is +2. So rather than being a 2 result, it's a 4 result, which is simply a step loss but no retreat. So the French hang on to Saint-Amand, but are taking casualties. Right, that's the end of the 3 p.m. turn for the Prussians, and we'll see where we go. Okay, so we've completed the 2nd phase of the 5 p.m. game turn, and again the French have been unable to break this 1 Prussian unit that's remaining in Saint-Amand, but the relieving force has failed to make any impression on the French, caused a few casualties on the river line, but again French defensive fire has proved effective, and 1 of the attacking battalions is now routing off the table. Down here, again, really just an exchange of musketry across the river line. The Prussians, as you saw, did assault earlier in the turn, but didn't make any progress. And now with the French defensive force in there, they decided not to assault this turn. Yeah, I think they will assault this turn. Okay, so we've got 24, 34, 36 points, but we have defensive fire from the French, which doesn't do anything. So 36 points plays 19. Okay, so that's only 1.5 to 1. That's a -1 modifier, becomes a straight modifier, no modifiers as we go across the river. We roll an 8. Okay, so that's just a morale test for the Prussians. Oh no, another unit routes. And another unit retreats. I think at this point, it may be a point to call it a day for the Prussians. They do have 1 more turn. They have 1 more wave of reinforcements, but that really is going to struggle to get into action. It's certainly not going to capture the objectives in Saint-Amand-La Haye, and the Prussians can expect, or the French can expect, to rack up another full set of victory points. Let's say where we are on victory points at the end of the 3rd turn, and perhaps extrapolate what would happen in turn 4. So at the end of this turn, the French have 33 victory points, and the end of turn 4, we'd expect that to increase to 39. The threshold for a French victory is 28. So they have achieved victory. The Prussians, even with another infantry brigade of reinforcements, aren't going to be able to recapture any of the objectives. I don't think they're going to cause any substantial casualties on the French, as they're all behind river lines and in buildings. The French might succeed in driving the Prussians out of this last building in Saint-Amand. That heroic defence has carried on for most of the game, but the objectives are all captured, the chateau is captured as well, and again no units in place to kick the French out of the chateau. So really clear victories for the French, and very different to the last time I played this, when the French battered themselves into submission. They attacked too early, didn't have any artillery support, didn't soften up the Prussians, just went in early to try and get as much progress as quickly as they could, with the illusion of Prussian weakness, as there were hardly any units on the table. But when the Prussians held off that first attack and brought on their first and second wave of reinforcements, they were then fully able to keep the French at bay. So interesting to see how this one turned out. Hope you enjoyed the quick look at this game. I would recommend it if anyone fancies Napoleonic board game. I think it's fun. I'll see you all again soon. Cheers everyone, bye.